Hi friends, this is CC and welcome to Hobby Hands. In this vlog, we're going to turn this into this. Yes friends, we're going to do a build of this, which is the Airfix 1/72 scale model of the Hawker P.1127. It's a vintage classic, which I like, and the model number is A01033V. What I understand is this is the prototype of the Harrier jump jet, and a very iconic aircraft at that. So it's a vintage classic because the tooling was done in 1963, and that's over 60 years ago. At the back of the box, you've got the paint and decal guide. What it also gives you is like a blueprint of the model or the aircraft, and it gives you nice indications of where the panel lines are. So let's look at what's inside the box. The first thing we see is the instruction manual. The build instructions are pretty clear. Not a lot of parts, and 2 pages of build instructions, and a tiny bit of color. Let's look at the parts. So the first 2 parts we see are the fuselage halves, a little bit of flash, and we've got raised panel lines, but they're very fine. So looks like I'll be using the scriber because I want recessed panel lines. So this first sprue contains the exhaust and a bit of flash there. The second other sprue contains the pilot. The pilot's got very skinny legs. That's the intake and parts of the intake there. These 2 sprues contain the wing parts. Again, raised panel lines. This bag actually contains the clear canopy. Looks like a bit of distortion. And finally, we have the decal sheet. Very nice fresh decals and very clean printing. Let's start working on this aircraft. So the first thing I do is cut out the pilot and clean up the pilot. So just scrape along the mold lines. I'm actually cleaning up the other cockpit parts. Alright, let's start painting. As there's not many parts and they're pretty small, I just brush paint them. We'll also paint the inside of the fuselage where the cockpit is. Now I'm painting the pilot. So firstly I'll give it a white primer and a yellow vest. The pilot is meant to be painted in white anyway, so the primer does actually help. And once the pilot's all painted, I give the pilot a coat of gloss varnish, and then I will do a wash and clean it up with a cotton bud with some thinner. It's painting in the details like the oxygen mask, the boots and the visor. All done now, all painted. So now what I'm doing is just giving the cockpit parts and the pilot a coat of flat varnish. And with the engine intake, what I do is give it a base coat of black, and then with a dry brush do the metallic gray. And again with the dry brush I'll dry brush it with silver. There you go, see? Before we assemble the 2 halves of the fuselage, we actually need to pop in the exhaust. So these are moving parts, so just carefully assemble and make sure that you don't get glue onto the moving parts. Starting to put in the interior pieces like the engine intake. I'm just finishing up some of the interior parts painted in black because otherwise it'll be visible from outside. So I'm assembling the cockpit now. And what we're doing is assembling the 2 fuselage halves together now. and we'll hold the two halves together with some masking tape. The fit isn't too bad. The two halves met together nicely. I'm assembling the major parts together now. Then this one is assembly of the wings. And just hold it together with some cloth pegs. As you can see, the joint lines are actually quite visible here. So what we need to do is then use putty or filler. So after we assemble the wings onto the fuselage, I'm going to also put some filler or some putty on the joint lines. Now the putty is dry, so we'll start sanding, and I will always start with a 600 grit, which will take off the majority of the material, and then after that followed by an 800 grit. After the 800 I use a 2000 grit, and finally a 6000 grit, and it's done. The next thing that we're going to do is to dip the clear canopy into some flow polish, which will give the clear piece a nice shiny finish. So dip and then shake off the excess, and then blot out any remaining flow polish onto kitchen towel. After that, we'll put it into a box with a lid. So what I'm going to do next is actually to start scribing the panel lines. So the model comes with raised panel lines and very fine ones, hardly visible. So I'm following here, which is like a blueprint on the box, and that will tell us where the panel lines are. So where I can see the raised panel lines, I'll turn them into recessed panel lines. Otherwise, I'll follow the diagram on the box. So run your scriber through the panel line to create it. First couple of times, just gentle. And then as you scribe that same line again, you put more and more pressure. Probably with this, you might need to scribe about 5 times. Alright, so here we are actually going to start assembling the canopy onto the aircraft. There you go. So the next thing I want to do is to mask the canopy. The only thing is the frame that's molded onto the canopy is actually very fine, and you can hardly see it. So what I need to do first is to create a frame. I'll simulate the frame by using skinny masking tape. And this will be the frame that we can't see. We're creating the frame, so to speak. The frame for the front windshield. So once the frames are done, then we'll start masking the parts that need to be kept free from paint. The pretend frame that we created with the skinny masking tape is a good guide. We can use that as a guide to where the frame should be. Alright, then use a sharp blade to cut off the masking tape. All right, so what you can see here is the masking done. So the next thing that we want to do is just to remove the frame, or the skinny masking tape that we use to create the frame, and that's what I'm doing here. Once I remove the skinny masking tape, we've got the exposed frame. And that's what it looks like. So yeah, just use a cotton bud again to make sure that there's no bubbles left. There you go. Looks pretty good and looks almost like the blueprint. Alright friends, just gonna show you that we are getting ready for paint, and you can see what I've done is before painting I've masked off the canopy and then the engine intakes, and also I've given the whole model pre-shading. So let's get ready for painting. So what I'm doing is to just lightly give the aircraft a base coat of silver. What we're doing here is now giving the whole aircraft a gloss varnish. The next thing that we'll do for this aircraft is put panel line wash. Alright, now that the panel line wash has dried, we're gonna clean off the splodges, and we do that with some cotton bud and some thinner. And what we're left with is nice, fine, neat panel lines. We are now ready to put on the decals. I'll just show you a couple of decals. Once all the decals are installed, I give the whole aircraft another coat of gloss varnish, and this will protect the decals. Okay, now as you can see, the aircraft is all nice and shiny, and what we do here is then to install or start the final assembly. Not a lot of parts, but it'll be things like the landing gears. I am also assembling the landing gear doors. Okay, all done. And what I'm doing next is actually to dry brush some white onto the aircraft to bring out the high parts of the aircraft. This helps those bits that stick out to become more visible. Alright, once the paint is done, the next thing that we're going to do is to do a bit of weathering. So the first thing is probably a bit of soot, and we'll do that near where the exhaust is. Alright, and We'll also do a bit of rust, probably around the landing gear. So a bit more weathering, but this time we're going to use oil stains. We'll put some oil stains on the wing, on the underside of the aircraft. So once the weathering is all dry and the dry brush paint is all dried, what we do next is to give the whole aircraft a flat varnish. So finally, all done. So the last thing that we did was to give it a flat varnish. So that's all dry now. And what we do here is to remove the masking on the canopy. Do this step carefully. We've done a lot of work. We don't want to damage the finish. My friends, all finished. There's a side view, top view, and a bottom view. A view from the tail, and a view from the nose. Final thoughts of this model. As you saw earlier, there is a pilot, but the pilot's got very skinny legs. So with this bit here in the tail, the part that was put on was actually bigger than the rest of the tail. So I had to sand that one down to make it flush. The same for the nose cone. The nose cone was a bit too big for the aircraft, and I had to do that. I had to sand it down. So the exhaust jets are movable. So that's amazing if you're going to use it, if you're going to post the aircraft. So the aircraft or the model didn't come with panel lines, or it came with very fine raised panel lines, but with the so-called blueprint at the back of the kit of the box, I can put in my own panel lines. Pretty simple kit, not many parts, pretty easy to do. The only challenge was probably to put in the panel lines and to clean out the joint lines. So cute model, nice for a display, a bit of historical value I guess, and it's a vintage classic, a very old molding, as good as it gets. It's still a fun build. One of the things I like to do is to wear the decals actually on top of the panel line. I actually like to run a blade along the panel line so that the panel line shows up underneath the decal. Do it gently, slowly, so that we don't destroy the decal. So friends, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that vlog. Please subscribe to my channel. Please give me a like, drop me a comment, and share the vlog with your friends and family. Thank you very much for watching. For now, this is CC signing off.